large number of participants who act as hedgers or who perform the role as hedgers, because their prime intention is to reduce the risk. They are getting into the futures market with an intention to reduce some kind of a risk. In some cases, it could be a risk with respect to the fluctuations of a commodity price, right? They want to protect themselves against the fluctuations in the price of the commodity, or they want to protect themselves against the fluctuations in interest rate changes, or even a fluctuation in a stock price change, right? Are probably the companies which are dealing in export market, the fluctuations in the exchange rates. So the companies typically want to protect themselves against the volatilities or fluctuations that are arising in any of these markets, and that is where they typically choose the futures market as the platform. So to protect themselves against those kind of risks, we are talking of entering into the futures market. So here the one important term that we need to understand is perfect hedge. So whenever I use the word perfect hedge, it means that we are trying to use the futures market. We are trying to hedge in the futures market. We are trying to use the futures market, which will completely eliminate the risk. Whatever is the uncertainty, if at all I'm able to eliminate the risk completely, then I call that I'm getting into a perfect hedge. But in reality, that is not that easily possible. So we are talking about how do I create a hedge in such a way that my risk is almost reduced, if not completely eliminated. To in what way I can create my hedging strategy so that the overall risk can be completely reduced. So that is what we are going to look at as a part of this particular session. So to start with, whenever we are talking about hedging, it's as good as I'm taking a position in a futures market. Now there are only two positions that I can take in on a one single future contract. Either it could be a long position or it is a short position. So when I'm taking a long position in the futures market, from a hedging perspective, I call it as a long hedge. When I'm taking a short position in the futures market, yeah, I'm talking about as a short hedge. Now, the intention in as a part of hedging strategy is I am protecting myself against the loss that I can get, protect against the loss that I can get in the underlying market. Probably I already have bought some shares. Now the risk for me is the price of the shares can go down. And if at all the price of the shares are going down, then obviously there is a loss that is going to build up for me. Now I want to protect myself against the loss. So because of that, I take some kind of a position in the futures market, either the long position or the short position. So that position should give the opportunity to me in such a way that if I am losing on my shares, I will gain equally in the futures. I will gain comparatively in the futures so that my overall loss, combined loss, is typically getting reduced. So that is where the volatility or the risk is coming down. So basically, whatever the loss that we are typically getting, in the typical business operations, right? Whatever is the loss that we are trying to get in the typical business operation is compensated by the gain that comes in the futures transaction, and overall loss is reduced to a drastic extent. That is what is the main purpose of getting into a hedging strategy. So under that, if I start looking at differentiating between a short hedge as well as a long hedge, as I already mentioned, I will take a short position in the futures contract in case of short hedge. I'll take a long position in the futures contract in case of a long hedge. Now, the major scenario where a person gets into a short hedging kind of a situation is he already owns an asset, owns the underlying asset, and he wants to sell it in future, or he gets worried that the price of that particular asset or the value of that particular asset will fall in future. He wants to sell it in future, but he is still afraid that the price of it is going to fall in future. And that is where he tries to get into a short position in the futures contract, where he will fix the price at which he is going to sell that asset in future. The price is fixed today itself. So even if the market price actually goes down in future, he is still able to sell that asset at the pre-contracted price itself. And that's one of the prime reasons he can very well gain out of this, or his loss is mitigated, because if the price of that particular asset is going to go down in future, he is forced to sell it at that lessened price. But with the short position in the futures, whatever is the loss that is coming up because of the price down is coming as a gain in the futures market, because he is able to sell it still at X, whereas the market price has become X minus 15. So he is able to gain 15 per contract in the futures contract, and that is what is going to compensate him in a much better manner. So one situation where generally people get into a short hedge is when they own the asset, they want to sell it in future, and they feel that the price of that particular asset is going to fall in future. Even if it is not owned at this moment, not owned now, but whenever I am of the feeling that I may buy it, I may own it in due course of time in future, and I may still sell it. I may own it and sell it. Whenever I am of that kind of an opinion, then also I can enter into the futures market quite comfortably into the short position. So that is one more dimension where a short hedging can come into picture. So whatever is the loss that is coming up, whatever is the loss that comes in the underlying asset, is compensated by the gain that comes in the futures market. Typically, when the price of that underlying goes down, price of the asset goes down, the short futures position gains by the difference, and the underlying asset will go down. So the difference is a reduced loss. So that is what comes as a part of the short hedging position. But when I am looking at a long hedge, which is I take a long position in the futures contract, and the prime scenario in which this happens is the company is looking at buying a particular asset in future. It wants to buy a particular asset in future. Generally, let's say the raw materials that it uses for producing a product, So when it wants to buy that kind of a raw material in future, and it is worried that the price of that in future can go up, it can't buy today. See now, let's say a company X is using maize as a raw material, or probably let's say company X is using silver as a raw material to produce some product. Now, it does not want to purchase that raw material immediately because it wants to use silver somewhere at a later date and produce the product. So, but it is, let's say it is apprehensive that the price of silver will go up in future. So it wants to protect itself against that possibility of growing prices. So one way is buy it immediately, buy now kind of a strategy. But when it is buying now, one, there is a cash flow that it is blocking, right? Because it does not want it immediately. Two, there is a storage cost. There is an interest because it might so happen that it is purchased with borrowed funds. The interest is getting applied right from now itself. So there are so many other costs that are coming up when I am trying to buy it now. So the better way is I get into a forward contract, a futures contract, entering into a long position so that I can buy it in the month which I really require. So either I can do this kind of a strategy wherein I'm ready to face the additional costs, or I could have got into a long futures position. Now, sometimes it might be worthy to get into this kind of a position, especially if I have an advantage of using it whenever I require. So that is what we call as convenience yield. Rather than holding a simple long futures position, which is not owning of the asset, I can still own the asset and incur the storage costs on it because I may have some other convenience of using it whenever I typically want to start my operation. So in some cases, having it in a physical form is much better than getting into a futures contract. In that case, I will not evaluate the futures contract, but wherever I don't want the material right away and I am still want to protect myself against the rising prices, I can get into a long futures kind of a position, into a long hedging strategy. So that is one way people try to get into a long futures. And another dimension is if at all they already have some kind of a short position, if at all they already have a short position in an underlying, let's say in the stock market or in any other kind of a market, if at all they have already a short position that is existing,